Major spoilers for all of Limbus Company. I'm not even going to try to hide spoilers since it's literally impossible with this kind of topic. Demian from Limbus Company and his blue group, which is the most notable feature of them all, is quite an enigmatic character. Considering the fact that he gets an entire scene in the trailer, they are definitely of significant importance to the story, and considering the power and strengths displayed by each of them, this group must be accomplishing some sort of goal. But the problem is that Demian and everyone he knows has a habit of speaking highly metaphorical, which makes it quite difficult to actually analyze what they are saying. From what we can see, Demian takes a lot of inspirations from the books The Little Prince, and of course the book Demian, which the character that he is from, which is also the origin of the character Sinclair. This won't be a summary of either of the books, since it's unlikely that these kind of texts and their main themes could be summarized by me just talking. So I'll just do this thing where if something is kind of looks like a reference to the book, I go you see, this is a reference to this part in the book, and you kind of just have to trust me on that. The first time we see Demian is after the end of Canto 3, in which Demian shows up and kills. He seems to manifest 7 Hmong or so, since they are all rings of light, but 3 of the 7 are a lot smaller than the rest, so they might not be full Hmong. And recent lore has caused the theory that these might not actually be Hmong, but rather his specific ability was a sign. This canto also has quite a lot to do with the sign, about how it can be manifested and such. In the book Demian, the sign is meant to show that a person has the ability to change the future, or it's just somehow different enough from everyone else that they will be able to change the future and decide, which is why Demian assembles a group of people who bear the sign, including Sinclair within the book Demian. So the theory was that Rings of Light and the blue flash that he used to kill Cromer was not in fact Hmong or any such light-based technique, but rather his own ability manifested through the sign. First, he starts off saying, "You've changed your fate, Sinclair. Right now, you're either a coward or a hero, but you've still yet to let go of your fears completely." And then he goes on to console Sinclair about his situation. This is one of the first ominous lines he says, which is, "The world is about to head for a new birth, and only a few individuals can get there." This relates to the whole thing Demian, where Demian gathered up a group of people with signs. All of them had ideas that could change the world. Then again, considering the actual ending of the book, it's unlikely that all of them were actually able to fully change the world, so the sign might not be a guarantee for a high position, since his group included people of fringe religious groups, people who have new philosophical ideas, and of course people who would fight in the war that came at the end of the book. Of course, considering how the smoke in the Second Smoke War was blue, according to the Sinclair from the future we see in Canto 9, Demian is definitely somehow involved in the war, though this war might take the place of the World War that happened in Demian. In the war, Demian was stated to be of a higher military ranks, so he will likely lead his own organization within the war as an additional faction, perhaps even the Braxis chariot that we see in the offhanded mention. Of course, he follows this up with Sinclair as one of them, saying that he was someone who could head for the new world, which, considering the meaning of sign, is likely the case. After this, he says something even more ominous. Cromer attempted to become a god, like those which people of the past were said to believe in. Sinclair almost became her stepping stone. This is absurdly confusing, since the only mention of gods we see in the city as far as the messages of the index, or the prescript devices of the index, which send out prescripts that are able to somehow benefit the index despite their weird and cryptic nature. But I doubt that Cromer just wanted to become a leading member of the index, considering how there is no real relation between the N-Corp Inquisitor branch she led and the index. But the important part here is attempted to become a god, like those which people of the past were said to believe in. What sort of people in the past? What does this mean? Does this mean the past as in before the city even was built? Or perhaps even before the civilization that left all the ruins and singularities in the outskirts would collapse? What kind of god would that be? But she was attempting to ascend using the light, so perhaps the idea of a god like those that people in the past were said to believe in, were in reference to the concept of actual religious groups with their holy texts and their gods. The Cromer being becoming some sort of ascended being, the light, whose decisions and actions were infallible, would qualify her for be some sort of god. After which, he states an interesting line. It's ironic they resorted to creating false imagery, something they love so deeply, which is quite interesting for the concept of N-Corp, since imagery is the consistent theme within all of N-Corp. Since N-Corp seems to hate false imagery the most out of all things, they ban recording since they provide realistic experiences but are not real experiences. They ban prosthetics because they are similar to real limbs, but they aren't. but they also seem to be characterized by hypocrisy in this, or of a difference in judgment regarding this. The thou can't experiences to place the entire lives of people and create mounds of fake people in their ego space, it being the direct manifestation of their mind. Maybe their will to destroy all mirror worlds that they mention once in Canto 9, and I'm pretty sure a few times earlier, it also stems from a similar idea, perhaps meaning that they believe that the mirror shows them things that aren't real in this reality. After which he said, "A pleasure to meet you, Dante. You're the adult who conditions and clear at the moment." The specific use of the word adult and the use of the word condition are both definitely references to the Little Prince, considering further context. Since the narrator, or the main character, since the Little Prince is written from a first-person perspective, is a pilot who is a dog who crash lands in the desert and encounters the Little Prince. And the whole thing about conditioning is likely a reference to the segment in The Little Prince where the Little Prince befriends a fox. Within it, it's not said that he makes friends with the fox, it's said that he tames it, he conditions it, and how forming bonds in relations with people is a form of conditioning, a form of training, a form less to attach each other to each other, but more so change oneself to become similar to them or become reliant and dependent on them. And then he says a line, "As for who I am and for what I was talking about, you'll see in due time," which is not helpful at all. And then he says, "When Sinclair takes flight with an unshakable face and the power of the heart." And right, when he becomes one with the beautiful stars, that is when I'll return. I'll talk about the whole stars thing later, since he said it a lot more later, and it's a lot more important, and when he says it later, take care of Sinclair until and Dante. And of course, Dante's confused why Demian can hear him. The second appearance of Demian we see after this is at the end of Canto 4, where after the entire group finishes their journey through K-Corp, or Demian appears at the ending, appearing only to Dante and not to any other sinner. I feel like this might be something interesting. Perhaps he avoids appearing in front of other people other than people that he knows, for some sort of reason. So here he appears only to Dante and only talks to Dante, and he says, "I told you that I won't come to see you again." And then he says, "Why can't people settle for just looking?" I feel like this is intentional analysis on the actual events of Canto 4, where the tearful thing was the being who focused on looking and observing suffering and cried tears in their stead. So the idea of perhaps settling for just looking, to not emotionally resonate, to not be captured in the moment, and to not obsess yourself over such things is quite interesting. Saying it should be enough to simply admire it, smell the scent, enjoy the moment, but they nurture greed and obsession as they contain it in their sights, eating themselves away. Just like how they force the eye to watch so much suffering through the mirrors. After this, he follows the mirror too. It was created for simple enjoyment. You could compare it to a bag of chips with hundreds of flavors, for example. But then someone came up with an idea. What if there were a way to reach into that possibly infinite bag of chips and take what I don't have? What if all of us could have the flavors that way? It wouldn't be considered theft according to the rules made by adults anyways. That, in fact, is stealing from me. This is pretty obviously referring to the engine of Mephistopheles, which in lore is used to extract all the identities and egos that Limbus Company uses from the mirrors. The idea that this is somehow stealing from him has a lot of possible meanings here. Since, for example, you can simply consider him to be some kind of multi-dimensional being who subsists in mirror worlds. Or you can take it for a more metaphorical idea, since we've already gone through enough metaphors already. You are stealing the possibility of something happening by observing it in the mirror and accepting it as a different world, and then drawing it out as identity. You won't ever become the thing that's in the mirror. You have lost a chance now and won't get to participate in such. Or perhaps it even means they're stealing the possibility from yourself. To see it in the mirror, to take it from the mirror, means that you will strive to become it. You won't become it, since you consider it to be an entirely different being now. After this, he followed up with the line, "Countless stars are in the sky, but they are all the same. If someone else saw them, they might have nothing more than dim lumps of life." But someone who found the twinkle was staggeringly charming took one of the stars and hung it on a high place for everyone to see, expelling the dark. All the people would rejoice. Now here's a question. What will become of me who has been robbed by me? And the star is now forced to illuminate the dark forever. The first part about taking a star from the sky is definitely partially a reference to what happened in K-Corp, since we see that K-Corp Singularity was taken by going out into outskirts and wishing upon a star. And now it's the star made to illuminate the dark, as in being made to create products that can help profit for the companies that manages it. But what will become of me who has been robbed by me can probably be assumed to be an extension of the previous metaphor, of how using VR technology is to steal from yourself, since you steal the possibility from yourself. And of course, the VR your friends use is any difference. That is such a cruel piece of technology. Take your time with the answer, just draw me a sheep later. You may not remember it right now, but you promise to. The whole your VR is your friends use isn't any difference. It follows up with the idea of the VR as being a stolen possibility. The fact that the mirror isn't any different from this might also be some kind of hint that the mirror could be a potential singularity, since it's compared to the K-Corp singularity here. And of course, take your time with the answer, just draw me a sheep later. The whole draw me a sheep line is a reference to the Little Prince, or one of the first things the Little Prince asks the pilot to do is to draw him a sheep. But the thing about the draw him a sheep thing was that the pilot drew the Little Prince multiple sheep. But every time the Little Prince had a problem with the sheep, saying that its head or its face or its legs looked wrong, or that it was incorrect. But after all of this, the pilot instead decided to draw the Little Prince a closed crate, saying that the sheep was inside of the crate, and that was what it is. And that was what the Little Prince accepted as the drawing of the sheep. The way that the Little Prince refused all of the sheep that the narrator drew him is actually quite similar to how the people utilize the mirror, using the mirror to see through different possibilities, but saying that it's not just but noticing that none of the possibilities are the ones they want, so they simply just extract them and use them as identities. To draw Demian closed crate would be to either stop using the mirror technology permanently and accepting the world for the way it is, or perhaps even doing something with the mirror where all the possibilities in the mirror are expected, but you never see the mirror, so the identity is never formed. Kind of similar to the idea of quantum physics, where you don't know if the cat is living dead. To not observe the mirror world is to accept that there are theoretically infinite worlds, infinite possibilities in there, but you don't observe them, so you aren't stealing them, you aren't forcing those possibilities into reality, or simply accepting them for the way they are. And of course, the whole thing, you may not remember it now, but you promise it is way more important than you expect it to be. Does it mean that Demian somehow knows Dante from before Dante got turned into a clock? Or perhaps that Dante knew Demian before they turned into a clock? It's likely that Demian might know what the whole point of Dante's journey is. Demian might know the whole point of gravy the aspect, or whatever Dante's goal actually is. The next appearance of Demian's group is in Canto 5. This time it's not Demian appearing, but rather Rin appearing. Rin, who was previously in Webs of the League of Nine, has now possibly become a different form, appearing to be an hourglass suspended in water above a suit. Rin here somehow resembles the idea of a reverse Dante, since Dante is a clock head on fire, and Rin is the hourglass head in water. So there may be some connections there. Rin reacts to the sinners being surprised about his appearance and introduces himself. First it said, I have no need of ships, should I cross the ocean? I'm simply here to look at all of you, which is a reference to the poems of the actual author, or it was a poem being the butterfly in the sea. Since in the scene in Canto 4, when Rin does talk about becoming a butterfly and going over the ocean, Rin then says, I'm simply here to have a look at all of you. You are those who follow the Golden Bow's ray. And it's shown later, but Demian's group also had a heavy connection to the Golden Bows, and even add explicitly later that they're in charge of guiding people to the Golden Bows themselves. The whole point of the I'm simply here to have a look at you kind of relates to the previous lines with Demian about how simply looking and observing is enough. Then Demian reveals that the Golden Bow is no longer in the Lockport facility and is now in the Pallid Whale. Rin acts very ominous about it, so it's quite confusing. Then the final part that Rim says, it matters not who lays claim upon a Golden Bow, or to what end they use it. It is no more than the mere fluttering of wings. We simply seek to steer the echoes of that fluttering towards a better direction, which is the whole thing about them and guiding people to the Golden Bows. We are those who watch all those who bide the time, those who will be as sovereigns of a star. Yet we are those who cannot all embody the same star. This part is absurdly confusing, and so I'll try my best to explain it here. The whole point, we are those who watch all those who abide the time, and likely a reference to how Demian's group had a habit of just sitting around observing, and only occasionally going to influence the story. But each one of the times where Demian's group actually influences what happens is very significant, such as Demian killing Cromer, which completely changes the story of Limbus Company, since if Demian didn't do so, then Dante would have been killed by Cromer's acid. So Demian here obviously steers the Golden Bow to be in possession of Limbus Company, and the whole line of Sovereigns of the Star is likely a reference to the Little Prince. And the Little Prince eventually starts explaining his backstory, saying that he was once on another planet or star. The idea of planets and stars are quite interchangeable in The Little Prince, despite the actual differences between them in real life, since planets and stars in The Little Prince are both just tiny glowing rocks in space. In it, The Little Prince said that he once lived on a star, and it's shown as just a little rock in space that glows, after which he decides to journey through a bunch of stars, seeing a bunch of people who lay claim on their own stars. I feel like, considering what actually happens in The Little Prince, I feel like these might be a reference to the nest, where for every single nest, there is a corporation that lays claim upon the star. So something similar happens where every star has one person on it, and the people on the stars all seem obsessed with their certain topics. For example, one of the stars had an accountant on it who was really obsessed with this idea of accounting and owning things, writing down a ton of lists saying that they owned every single star in the universe, even if they can never touch the star that they say that they own. But the accountant still keeps doing math nonetheless, even though it all seems quite pointless in the end. And the corporations in the city seem quite similar to this actually, constantly focusing on making profit, and all having their own little obsessions, such as the T-Corp director wanting to freeze time forever, or N-Corp obsessing over false imagery and such. So even though they are sovereigns of an entire star, they're more so consumed by themselves and the system that they live in, more so than anyone else, which is why the Little Prince chose to leave his star and come to Earth. So those who will be the sovereign star taken in this context mean that they want to be leaders of a corp, assumedly after the Second Smoke War, considering the previous metaphors. How they wish to incite the Second Smoke War and use the golden bows in order to all have their own corporations and run their own parts of the city. After this, Rim talks with Song, but these parts are very connected to the main lore, since it's mostly just Rim reminiscing about the breakup of the League, and of course Rim also references a bunch of poetries that were written by the IRL League of Nine, which are actual Korean poets. And then Rim says, "I hope I have been a useful signpost to you all. I was a bear upon who only knew where the sea, the rivers, and the city were. Now I seek to reach there with my wings, that is all." And then Rim just does a trick where Rim turns into a bunch of water, which is kind of weird. Rim also appears at the end of the canto in the form of a blue butterfly flying over the ocean and completing the metaphor with a poem. But Rim doesn't say anything there, Rim just flies around as a butterfly. The next appearance of Demian we see is at the end of Canto 6, where Demian appeared again only to Dante in T-Corp. First, Dante is confused about why Demian still has color. Demian says, "Because the light is yet to reach me, because the star is an infallible distance away." First, the whole point of the light is yet to reach me could first be attributed to actual explanation on why Demian has color, since the reason that T-Corp is colorless is since the concept of light and time are actually quite connected. For example, if time were to slow down, the light itself would decrease in wavelengths, changing the color. So removing all color would make T-Corp easier to control time in, but this could also be interpreted as in the light, as in what it was released by Lobotomy Corporation at the end. I have a separate theory that Demian is Enoch. Demian is like Enoch returned in some form, returned after being consumed by the Incognito, since if the light is released and Incognitos as Enoch was originally taken by would also be released with it. So the light is yet to reach me might mean that Demian is in fact Enoch, and is trying to find some sort of redemption or ending to his story. But because the star is an infallible distance away, I feel like it's related more to Dante, since at the start of the story, Dante also talks about how they had hidden the star somewhere, but now they don't even remember where the star is. It's also said that Dante could see the star simply by looking up. So perhaps the star is like actually hidden very far away, as in space or something, but it might also be hidden in an emotional distance way, like inside of someone's ego space, or somehow assimilated into the light, or actually far away, as in the outskirts. Then Demian says, "Do you like flower? I imagine there are single rose you've taken care of for a long time. Your room was always brimming from the sweet aroma of that flower. One day you leave the rose behind to go on a long, long journey. In your journey you come across a large garden, and there you see thousands of the very same rose you once called for. That sight brings you to tear, and you drop to your knees. Why do you suppose that is?" Then Dante answers, "Because I finally come to understand that the one I truly love was a rose I left behind." Demian says, "Correct, even though there are thousands of roses in the world. There is but one rose in mine. You watered it diligently, cared for it, even as its thorns picked your fingers. So if that your care can make its aroma bloom." Then Demian connects this metaphor with Wuthering Heights and the events that happen in it. All of this is obviously a reference to the Little Prince being basically a word for word of what happened. The Little Prince once had a rose on his planet, which he cared for a lot and wanted it to grow. Of course, the rose wasn't the nicest as the Little Prince, often being vain about its beauty. Often being vain about her beauty, since the rose is distinctly female. And then of course, after the Little Prince lands on Earth, the Little Prince runs into an entire rose garden, and all the roses in the rose garden try to call him in and talk about how he would like a rose, but he says that the only rose he cares for is the one that he left behind. In fact, at the end of the story, the Little Prince returns to the planet that he was once on, and the main reason for this was because he wanted to care for the rose again. The roses, the little prince, was definitely a metaphor or symbol, or like the manifestation of the concept of love. How even if you might go through some difficulties, even if the other is imperfect, even if their love might prick your hands with their thorns, they're still the only one you love, and the one that you're willing to return to. So Demian repeats this theme of love, which was repeated throughout the entire canto, and especially the ending where Catherine offers to delete herself for Heathcliff. This could also be taken as the idea of Zabirius, since Heathcliff loved his Catherine, but did not really care for the every Catherine that wished to hunt down all the Catherines, so he accepted her sacrifice to delete every single Catherine, which would resolve the wild hunt and resolve every Catherine, since the only one that he cared for was the one in his world, not the infinite ones that live in so many other worlds. And then here's something very interesting. Demian says, "Do you understand? Once I learned to properly love my own very own flower, I no longer need to protect the thousands of other roses in the world. People of this star care for thousands of rose blossoms in their own garden, but still fail to find what they truly desire. Here's the most important part. People of this star. I'll just interpret this in my own way, since I related the idea of people who own the star in The Little Prince to the idea of corporations in the city. So in my interpretation, this will be saying that the people of T-Corp care for thousands of roses, care for 1,000 different things, little trinkets, little desires that they have, but they fail to find what they truly desire, since all they really do is constantly work for more time and money. Perhaps they even get more time and money in the end, but is that what they truly desire?" And of course, Dante says, "But what of the other flowers that have already bloomed? What happens to them?" This is likely responding to the whole thing about Catherine, about what would happen to all the other BR worlds when someone like that is deleted. Then Demian says, "You will find the answer to that question yourself when you can draw me a sheep," and this comes back to the idea of draw me a sheep. So considering how draw me a sheep required the narrator to draw a crate and saying that the sheep was in it, this probably means for Dante to truly accept the idea of mirror worlds, to truly accept that there are different dimensions, different worlds, but to appreciate what is their world, to appreciate their own world, and not endlessly stare into other worlds when looking for things, searching for things, and even stealing their own possibilities. So when Dante could finally draw Demian a sheep, it's when Dante makes this realization and understands it all. After then, the idea of someone being deleted from every other mirror world would make sense to them, since now every single other mirror world is covered in the same crate, covered in the same knowledge that there are in fact other worlds, other versions of yourself. But to you and the people and the versions in your world of the people you care about is what truly matters. And I'm pretty sure what the last time we've seen Demian so far is in the end of Canto 7, where Sanson and Demian talk together. This of course shows that Sanson is in a group with Demian, and Sanson also does somewhat display more properties of their group, since he directly leads Don Quixote to get to Guanbo, enacting all the tales that reveal Don Quixote's backstory, and eventually even being the one who removed Don Quixote's shoes, so that she would try to find the real Don Quixote. First, Sanson says, thus ends the tale in which they lay claim to another golden bow. Each member of Demian's group seems to all have an obsession of some sort, or a Dora-like idea, which might lend credence to the idea that they're all distortion and the recreation of the Library of Ruina, where Argalia, which was the blue color gathered up a bunch of distortions and tried to claim the light of the library. So this might be another event of that happening. They don't seem to be the ones trying to claim the light themselves, as they're guiding people to claim it instead. So this might also relate to the idea of them being sovereigns of stars, since they all have their own obsessions, their own little things that traps them on their own worlds, similar to all these, with Sanson's idea being the whole point of the tale. Also, the question of who Sanson is also quite strange. And Sanson is shown to be incredibly powerful, and I'm pretty sure he even said once that he needs to be at least a second kindred in order to be this powerful. But none of the people from the Manchaland even know what family that he is from. So perhaps Sanson was actually a lower grade blood fiend in La Mancha who also managed to escape, but ended up distorting somehow after hearing about Don Quixote's idea of tales and stories and heroic natures. And this distortion made him strong enough to do everything that he does in the canto. Then Demian says that he managed to tame the bow. The wording here is very specific, to tame the bow, not to just claim or collect the bow. Since tame is also referenced in The Little Prince, being the specific way that the Little Prince befriends the fox, about how the fox was changed to live with humans, or tamed in that matter. Perhaps the tamed Guanbo will be to change its ideas, change its desires, changes the wish that it has made to work with their causes. Then to this end, they have indeed. I can't help but look forward to what kind of fruits this Guanbo, stepped in so much struggle and bloodshed, will bear, and at what cost too. I intend to enjoy this play for a little longer. Of course, we already know that if you graft a bunch of golden bows together, you could turn them into like a golden tree, and it will somehow bear fruit. Tree get told again at the end of Canto 9, where Faust is told to harvest the fruit from whatever golden bow tree that they make. So growing this kind of tree is probably also the goal of Demian's group too. Then Sanson says, "For I must gaze into the far horizon, and shine a light for the blinded, that I may turn them away from the seas they mustn't seek. I will spark the flame again and again should it go out, so that the fallen nebula's homeward journey to the star may not be veiled in shadows. Once that is over and done with, I suppose I shall become a sovereign of the star, guided to my promised eternal respite." Becoming a sovereign of the star is stated multiple times to be the goal of the Demian's group. The idea of them wanting to become leaders of corporations does kind of make sense, but it might also mean different things. For example, perhaps it means that they wish to be an embodiment of a concept, being sublated to light and embody the people's desires. Or perhaps this is one of the only times where they are literal, meaning that they literally want to be the sovereign of the star and build a space station around the star or something, since we really don't know at this point. And be guided to my promised eternal respite. This part kind of works against the idea of the sovereigns of stars being the leaders of corporations, since we know damn well that the wings of corporations are capable of falling, and are capable of collapsing, and even singularities being lost. But the whole point of eternal respite is referenced in The Little Prince, since every single owner of a star in The Little Prince was in fact immortal, while each of them constantly focusing on their one task, forever, utilizing their immortality by continuing to do the same thing while trapped on the same tiny little star forever. And then there's the words, the fallen nebulae. I feel like the most reasonable assumption here is that Dante is fallen nebulae, since the pilot also falls out of the sky in The Little Prince, and of course the fallen nebulae's homeward journey. Since Demian has already said that the Limbus Company, or as a group, is able to somehow make a journey, and Dante is the one who leads the journey, who wants to have their aspect engraved, who wants to do something with their stars. So perhaps a homeward journey would be Dante returning to the star and becoming another sovereign of a star, and something like that. Something else interesting here is that somewhere in Canto 7, it buries the Night of the White Moon, when it mentions that the war with the nebulae from the outskirts is inevitable. But we really don't know what a nebulae is meant to mean. Nebulas are places where stars are formed, since nebulas are giant clouds of gas in space, and these giant clouds of gas would often coalesce into smaller points, igniting into stars. Or perhaps the nebulae are things that have potential to become a star. So Dante not be able to find their star might be because that they are the star themselves and are capable of turning into one. So perhaps the nebulae are like precursors to singularities, or precursors to whatever a star is supposed to be. And then Demian says, "When the time comes, we will all be able to find joy just by looking at the skies. And I'll now wait for the sun to set into the gloaming before nightfall, waiting for the sheep, the one who fell from the skies, will draw me." This kind of reinforces the idea of the fallen nebulae being Dante, since it's said again that Dante is the one who fell, since Dante is also the one that's supposed to draw Demian the sheep. But all of this, I guess I can come to the general theory that Demian's group wants to shine into the Tree of Light, since the whole point, gathering the golden bows, getting Limbus Company to grasp the golden bows, having people who all experience emotional sufferings, and also progress their characters and develop as people in order to attain the golden bows. These are all kind of recreations of what happened in both Cyber Aruna and the Lobotomy Corporation, how they were able to make the lights by resonating to the emotions of people, by showing that people can become good and emotionally change themselves. I guess that's all I can really say about this, as Demian Groups wants to shine the light for all 7 days, and becomes the leader of a corporation, or becomes the sovereign of star. And Dante is somehow nebulae, so perhaps Dante can turn into a star, becomes a singularity that Limbus Company uses to become the new L-Corp, or perhaps become a star, and become the sovereign of a star, as in being assimilated into the light, being the basis of the natural goodness of people in the city, being able to guide people. I guess that's all I can really glimpse from all of this. Unless they watch this all be wrong, and sovereign of a star mean that they literally want to build a space station, and Dante being nebula, and Dante being fallen nebulae means that Dante is literally a nebulae, as in Dante would someday just explode in a giant cloud of gas. Imagine if that's true. I would feel real stupid then. I guess we all are.
The weight, 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 the weight.
But here's a strange thing that I neglected to remind you of.
The weight.
In the book Demian's mother, who is the one that Sinclair has a particular affection towards, is also one who leads a group of mark bearers, and of course her name is Eve. Demian and his group in the Limbus Company have stated multiple times that their goal is to guide people to the golden bows. Demian's group acknowledges that the golden bows can bear fruit. Faust has stated that the golden bows could be formed into a tree, which would bear the fruit. In the Bible, Eve is the one who convinces Adam to take a fruit of the tree. Demian and his group are trying to guide Limbus Company to commit the original sin. Perhaps this is a process of the Second Smoke War, but humanity is about to be cast out of the Garden of Eden. It will make sense that Faust is the one who wants to harvest the fruit, since in her or his book, he makes a deal with the devil. That it is the devil in the form of snakes that convinces both Adam and Eve to take the fruit. Considering how the tree is probably the tree of light, the devil in this case might be Carmen. If Demian's group is similar to Argonia's group in being guided by the distortion, which is somewhat believable considering how Rin looks, it might be likely that they have already been tempted and are guiding people into taking the fruit and committing the original sin in the process. Another possibility is that the snake in the story could be Iori, as Iori, the purple tear, has the consistent symbolism of being the serpent, since even in the beginning of the game, Virgilius refers to her as a serpent, and that all of this, creating Limbus Company and guiding them into committing the original sin, might be some part of her grand plan in order to bring her son back, using some property of the fruits of the golden bows. Here the theory hits a bit of a crossroads. The first option is that the first fruit has already been taken, and the second option is that it can be interpreted as this is being the first fruit as taken from the Tree of Eden. If the first fruit has already been taken, since the first fruit specifically gives knowledge of good and evil, the original Sea of Light might be the knowledge in of itself, since it gives people a sense of self, as pride is the origin of all sin. This good and evil is also similar because of how it separates ego manifestors and distortions. And here we bring back to the point of the action as drawing a sheep is meant to correlate with something to do with Mephistopheles, since the protagonist of Little Prince ended up choosing a closed crate as said to contain the sheep, and that the subsequent fruits in the Bible were said to grant infinite knowledge and eternal life after the first one was already taken. This could mean that this infinite knowledge would be what Faust needs to upgrade Mephistopheles, drawing the sheep by containing all possibilities into that demonic engine. So here, referencing back to the idea of what a sovereign of the star is, as a recap, in The Little Prince, the people who spent their entire lives on small rocks in space, living forever but obsessed with one task. I have already made the example of the accountant who was shown to do the same. I have related this to the process of distorting, since obsession is there, or becoming leader of a corporation, since singularities are also referred to as stars. But this instead seems similar to the result of consuming the subsequent fruits in the Garden of Eden, as they have gained eternal life and are using that eternal life for their one singular purpose. And now back to the idea that perhaps this is the first fruit that will be taken from the Garden of Eden. This will mean that this fruit has the knowledge of good and evil, which could be the actual completion of the Seed of Light project. It would be the cure to the disease of the mind, as people would know if they are doing something wrong and what they should do to do the right thing after attaining such a fruit. But this means that in order to complete the full story from the Bible, we're still missing an Adam. My best theory is just that Dante is Ion reincarnated somehow theory, since Adam is an alternate personality of Ion. But this has great repercussions if you think of this, since Adam was the one who wanted to turn everyone into abnormalities so they could be their true selves. This further connects with the theme of Demian's Eve in it. As in it, the mark bearers, despite being the people who bore the marks of the sinner, being the marks of Cain, they all wanted to enforce their own will completely, which is very similar to this philosophy of making every person into an abnormality that is based on their views and experiences. But considering a certain singularity description, this would mean that the Tree of Light is completed before the Second War, as it is said that the Second Smoke War is fought between the humans and mechanical amalgams and distortions, meaning that even though the disease of the mind is cured, war and suffering would still persist, rendering Carmen's original goal kind of pointless in the process. Or perhaps with the knowledge of good and evil, this war is fought between people who choose to abandon their humanity after knowing what is good and evil because they cannot handle their sins, whereas the other side accept their own humanity and fight for the goodness that they now understand and fight for. After this, the question is what it means for humanity to be cast out of the Garden of Eden in this case. I believe that the Second Smoke War would end up destroying the city itself, or at least take the head out of power, and will cause enough destruction to invalidate the existence of wings. Since I feel like this would be a reasonable interpretation of the idea of being cast out of the Garden of Eden. If Project Moon decides to make a good ending, this will allow humanity to rebuild from the start with understanding and justice, What if they decided to write about it and humanity would be ended right then and there? If this idea of there being chapters after Inferno was true, and that Limbus Company wants to go on to like 33 or whatever chapter there is in the Divine Comedy, maybe it would follow the people, or maybe just all sinners, rebuilding society and exploring the outskirts with a bunch of ego users. But here's the question, what side will Limbus Company be on? Since they are the main force that we are following, and the force that Demian and his group are guiding, would the sinners collapse into the tree of light and all become abnormalities, seeing their own sins and seeing how they are the ones to commit the original sin? Or would the sinners face their sins and fight for humanity after assembling the final light? I guess they will face the sin and save the ego.
The weight, 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 the weight,